Hey everyone, I have been making some progress through Last of Us 2, and I wanted to share some of my thoughts on their choices of design. Hey everyone, I hope you're well, playing and or making the games that you all love. You're joining me, your host, Max Pears, and it's an absolute pleasure to be chatting to you, whether this be morning, evening, or night. I hope you are having a good time and your loved ones are safe too. So thank you all very much for joining me, your host, Max Pears, and I really appreciate your time and it choosing to be spent with these smooth jazz words. Haven't used that one in a while, so I thought we'd throw it on in there. So yes, I've been playing Last of Us 2 finally. I still haven't completed it. Please don't spoil it for me. I am begging you. I'm sure one of you will try, but please do not. And it's been a really fun experience. I haven't played it as much as I would have liked, just down to work and balancing a lot of things out. So it's a bit of a shame. But what's great is I've still seen a lot of great design within the games. No surprise, Naughty Dog do so well. And we're going to be having some guests from Naughty Dog join us in the near future. But without them, I'm going to talk about what I've seen, because they're going to bring some great knowledge to it. But I want to talk about the things that I've noticed along my way. So we're going to be talking about kind of the transition that Naughty Dog has been working on for a while now with their last few games into more kind of hub world from linear level design, and kind of breaking down things that I've noticed with their design, how they best use it, what is a hub world, these kind of elements all together, and really just showing and discussing what's made them so good, why have they transitioned to this, what's been the benefits from it. And yeah, I'm very excited. So there will be some spoilers. I'm not going to spoil anything in terms of story or narrative, just more about a certain section. So if you haven't played it, maybe you want to go play the game and come back. If not, please come and join. This is just going to be very early on in the game. So this is based in Seattle downtown, day one. And it's only going to be talking about what happens here and in this section that I've noticed, okay? So as I said, I'll try not to go through and spoil too much. Now, in terms of what else we're going to be going through, let's go through kind of the topics I want to approach. I'm going to be dividing this up into sections because not only does it help us kind of focus and myself really kind of focus on a topic, it also helps the editors, Alexander and Dan, figure out how to best edit around it. So I'll talk through kind of the sections we're going to divide this video up. We're first talking about, well, what is a hub world? What is the difference between hub world design versus other kind of level designs that we see? Talking about how they use it to build the world, environmental storytelling. How is it helpful from a narrative design point of view? Not only the narrative of the structure of the world, but also the narrative between that of the characters that the player takes the role of, and showing how relationships are forged in it. Talking about the density. What kind of activities take place there, how close they are, what are the possible reasons for why they've chosen for the location for them. Guidance, how is it they attract the player's eye and also lead through the spaces to keep players engaged, as well as notice when they're moving as well through the spaces. So these kind of the elements that we're going to be looking at through today's episode. So I hope you're excited as I am. And without further ado, we're going to just start talking about Last of Us 2 World Hub Design. Okay, so the very first topic we're going to be talking about is, well, what is a hub world? A hub world, what some of you might be wondering is, okay, well, how does it differ? What makes a hub world or classifies a level as a hub world? Well, Naughty Dog are definitely best known for more linear level design. And I'll break this down in the most simplest terms, all right? The simplest term. Linear level design is much more, as you can say, of a kind of a corridor spacing. You go from A to B. Now, obviously, it's not going to be as simple as just walk straight, because that would be boring and bad level design. But you cannot really stray or go off the intended path. The level designer and the environment artist have full control over where you can go and what you can and cannot see. Open world is much more of, when you think of something like, say, Assassin's Creed or that of Red Dead Redemption 2, GTA 5, where their entire cities built up around the player, so they don't necessarily have to just focus on the main missions. They can go off dart in different directions in order to actually go and see different elements, consume different types of missions as well, and just be entertained in a multitude of ways. That is the fun element of it that keeps it engaging and doesn't have an impact, we say, too much on the story itself. And it's these kind of differences. Now, Hub World used to be slightly different to what it is now, or how I remember it. A Hub World used to sometimes be that of kind of a safe space for the player. If you think of that in Destiny, what's called, I believe it is the Crucible. I hope someone corrects me if I'm wrong, but it would be where I think I have said it wrong. But think about it, it's the space where, and I'm sorry because I haven't played Destiny in a while, but I always remember the space where you would go and could meet with the other players, socialize with them, go buy equipment for your character, all of these different elements there that would make this space a hub world, because it was where you would decide what to do, where to go, and also have safe interaction. You can think of it in a also sense of Stormwind or Ironforge in World of Warcraft. Obviously, World of Warcraft is traditionally an open world game, but that kind of space where you'd be able to go into an area, it's quite safe, and you can have choices that impact your character but would not put them at risk. But more recently, we're seeing a huge development of this, and I think a lot of it goes back to, well, should we say recently, that I think we can appreciate is that of the Dishonored series and also the Deus Ex reinstallments, because of the fact that you go to these smaller open worlds. You think about Prague, for example, in, what was it? It was Mankind Divided, that was it. And people wonder if I actually play games, because I am just struggling with names today. But this was a space, Prague, where you were in this level. It had its own multitude of little events that you could explore, whether that be side activities or where you'd follow on for your main missions, these kind of elements. But it was a one solid level. You would leave, revisit, and all of this. And we're kind of seeing that now as Naughty Dog have been experimenting with this over the last few years. When we think about where it all started, I think it comes from, and I could be wrong, I do not know why they've decided to switch, but I can tell that there's something they've been thinking about. Just we as players have seen the recent changes. I think it originally started with Madagascar and Uncharted 4, which is then expanded upon in Lost Legacy. And now it's in here present in Last of Us 2. And again, some great design choices, and great to see the evolution of a team as well and their thought process on how it's changed. All these games are great and definitely worth playing. But we're seeing their kind of design process and thoughts come behind it with what they've tried to take and reapply in their theories from their linear levels to that now of the more open worlds with the use of landmarks, weenies, and much more. So a hub world essentially is, my fellow LDs and game gurus, is essentially a space which has a lot of options in terms that you can do, but only kind of only kind of active in that space, if you will. It is a smaller, should we say, if you imagine open world games as the whole cake, hub worlds are kind of just one slice of that cake there. I'm talking about cake because I've been on a diet and I definitely miss cake. But yes, that is kind of, well, what is a hub world? So I hope that explains it there. But before we go on, let's have a quick word from today's sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by none other than GameDev.tv. For those of you who don't know, they are a phenomenal resource which helps you who may not have any experience to those looking to grow and improve their experience and knowledge on game dev related tools, whether that be programming, design, or art. All of these you can find on their website. And not only are they a great resource, but they've teamed up with myself to give you a phenomenal discount. If you go on and follow through the links that I've got down below, which give you a range of courses, you'll find that there is amazing discounts of over 80%. Normally a course costs around about £200, but luckily with the codes that we've got, and should I say the links down below, you'll get them for what would be about $40 to $50, around that benchmark. So if you're looking to go for it, this is a great place to start your learning. I personally am going through the Unity Beginners 3D C# course myself, and I'm really enjoying it with great tutors like Rick and Sam, which have previously been on this podcast as well. So if you're looking to improve your skills, head no further than gamedev.tv. All of the links to the great courses will be down in the description below. Now back to the episode. Next topic we'll be talking about now is the world building. How is it they use the hub world to build upon the stories of the actual world that the player takes place in, that they explore, and how they use it to help guide the narrative? As we all know, Naughty Dog are also a master of narrative design, really creating compelling stories that we as players want to understand and know more about. And you can definitely do that a lot with linear level design. They've done it so much. But it's, again, fascinating to see how they've shown that within the hub world, because there's going to be parts of the stories which you might miss. You might not go and do all these other activities in the hub world. You as a player might just be solely focused on that of the mainline story and go on and take your adventures further with that. So we'll first talk about kind of some tips and tricks that I've learned through my time, and I'm just looking at the similar theories that have been applied across in Last of Us 2 for us. So when it comes to that of world, especially environmental storytelling within your world building, you want to kind of show the kind of overall narratives. And one of the big overall narratives is obviously the virus and how humanity has adapted and also been knocked back. You look at today's society, obviously humans are on top in terms of food chain as well as technology. That's it. But in Last of Us, because of the fact that the virus was so deadly, you've seen that the population has obviously decreased. There isn't as many humans present in the world, but we've seen that nature has taken control. Nature has taken back what we took from it when we built our cities. As I said, this takes place in Seattle. Now, to help tell that story, what they do, and it's present in Last of Us, what there is that they're trying to do, and one of their key kind of pillars of their story is the fact that nature is taking control. So they show this with the fact that the areas are overgrown, overrun by grass, trees, all these elements. What once was a clear road has now been just covered in green, as well as, people may not know this, and I've forgotten the correct term, but you have to clean out and be careful of the pipes that go underneath roads, otherwise they can explode and burst and cause all kind of deformation towards the roads, and you can see that as well present. So that's kind of the first story that's being told. Now, here's a tip, and again, it's a tip, it is not a hard rule, but when you're telling through environmental storytelling, you're kind of at maximum only supposed to tell 3 stories. Generally, it's best to be kept to 2, but it should only mostly hit 3. And the reason I say this is because if you don't have characters talking and narrating or an overall kind of storyline on top of it, it can get confusing as to why certain props are here, what happened in the area the players visited. And you can see that kind of structure kept within that of Last of Us 2 as well in Seattle downtown. So the kind of 3 stories that you see very present inside of the structure of the game comes from the fact that, well, 2 things here. Like we said, the nature earlier, but also Seattle was once a kind of quarantined checkpoint city. We hear Ellie discuss that when I believe it is Boston that took place in the first game. And you see that through with all these solid gates, checkpoints, what would have been armed turrets, watchtowers, barbed wire, making this place feel almost like a prison because of how the government shut it down. And that's kind of the second story, is showing and telling people, okay, not only was it overrun, but before it became overrun with nature, humans used this city to kind of try figure out how they could solve the virus problem, how one another actually interacted, with different people, kind of hierarchy on how that worked. You'll hear Ellie comment about it. So those are kind of the two prevalent stories in terms of the environmental storytelling. However, as I mentioned, you can go up to 3, but just do be careful because sometimes it's hard for the player to understand. And the third one, and this really helps because of the other narrative tools they have. You see it with graffiti, both the characters talk about this part, so it makes more sense. But I believe it's called Fedra. They're not there for Fedra though. Fedra, as I said, was what the governing body to keep kind of control of the lockdown and civilians while things were trying to be figured out. But they're after another group, the Washington, I think it was Washington Wolves essentially, or something along that kind of area. Sorry guys, I've clearly not got enough information with showing you all this. I've failed you. But they're after another group. And you can see the kind of struggle between both Fedra and the group that Ellie and Dina are after. And you can show this through kind of as I mentioned, the graffiti. Some of them have got like F Fedra, these kind of elements to it. But what helps to make this clear is the fact that you've got these characters narrating and talking over that, right? You have Ellie kind of talking about what they see. Okay, they mentioned there might have been a scuffle between them. You'll find different kind of notes as well around you. If you think about kind of audio log and pickups, you find that to help relay the story too. So these kind of helpful elements. But this is how it tells the story, right? This is how the world is built, by environmental storytelling, the conversation between the characters, and as well as finding things such as audio logs, diaries, journals, these elements, again, just to help. There isn't actually audio logs in Last of Us 2, I don't think, but we know understand what I'm trying to say, the pickups that you find in order to learn more. So all these elements come in to help tell the world's narrative. And similar, as we talked about in terms of exploration, you're going to be rewarded with more kind of backstory if you explore too. And for those who don't, then you have the comments of the main characters coming through as well. So yes, very good stuff there. And I hope, that helps as well for you if you are trying to tell more stories through your levels. Think about it as well. All right, we talked about world building, but another element that Naughty Dog have really kind of excelled upon in terms of their uniqueness about their approach with narrative and building these hub worlds comes from relationship building itself, comes from that of the characters we see and how they interact with one another within this world. So we're going to be talking about the characters of Ellie and Dina in this section and really think about how it is that those two grow, bond, and much, much more.
At Level Design Lobby, we believe everybody has a story to tell. Hobbyist or student, freelancer or veteran, we made it our mission to unite those who share our passion for creating and developing great games. Thanks to our generous Patreon backers, we've been able to do just that. So if you've already pledged your support, thank you. If not, you too can ensure the future of Level Design Lobby, helping us to create even more exciting content, collaborations, interviews, and much more. With awesome perks and rewards, whether you're a seasoned professional or just getting started, you're sure to find something for you. Want to share tips, tricks, and advice with passionate, like-minded developers? Our awesome community Discord has you covered. Fancy practicing your level design, creating strong portfolio content, and having fun? Then try our level design weekends. Or perhaps you want to individually discuss your work, hone your skills, or level up your career? Then consider our one-on-one mentorships. If you share our vision, then go to patreon.com/Level Design Lobby for more information and to pledge your support. Thank you.
Now, they already have a relationship prior to exploring here, but they're still obviously in the early stages of their relationship in terms of romantically, so they're still trying to get to know one another as well. And it's this kind of element that I think is really nice. Now, as I mentioned earlier about how Naughty Dog deliver narrative, again, this comes back to the element with Uncharted 4 in Madagascar. It's the moment when Drake, Sam, and Sully are driving together in the Jeep, And when Drake would get out of the car, they would pause the topic of the conversation. And then after that, when Drake re-entered the car, what happened was one of the characters would prompt the other and be like, oh, you were saying? What was that you were talking about earlier? And then it just felt so natural, as if they'd pick up where they left off. The story would stop because you've actually gotten out of the car. But it kept you engaged and meant the drive was engaging not only from a gameplay point of view, but also through that of a narrative point of view. It was so inspiring that even Cory Barlog mentions it was one of the elements he wanted to replicate in terms of God of War, the 2018, in how Kratos and Atreus would talk as well. And you see that as they go in and out of the boat when exploring different parts of their world as well. So this is one of the things that they do very well again, and they build on it in different elements. Now we mentioned it took place in the Jeep. However, in this game, Last of Us 2, you find that Ellie and a companion are riding a horse together. So slightly different, in terms of a vehicle, but still has the same narrative in terms of plot as they communicate with one another. As you get off, re-enter, their dialogue will go from there. Fantastic, really easy. We'll talk about the horse in terms of traversal of world design in hub world design a little bit as well. But yes, not only that, it's actually about kind of the prompts that you get from exploring the world too. You'll see that when you actually go past certain kind of elements, you'll find that like Ellie will mention she didn't like growing up in like I said, I believe it was Boston from the original, and how it really forced hard times on the people. Well, Dina kind of had a whole different experience because that's not what she grew up. So she's starting to ask questions, right? And this is, bringing them closer together from understanding each other's past. But for us as players, it's communicating more about who they are, allowing us to get a better sense of really what it is that makes them who they are in terms of this situation, how they both grew up, what were the differences, kind of also building up on the world as well, because it shows that not every city was the same, right? Not every place had the same luxuries, or other places had different kind of problems growing, right? Growing pains, if you will. Not only that do we have these conversations which are prompted on the horse or through what the characters see and are pointed out, but by exploring, you'll have these dialogue prompts over Dina's head where she's mentioning about, say she sees something. There's an example where you go to where was it? I think it was a record store, and she talks about kind of some of the music she'd heard growing up as a kid, but you only know that when the triangle prompt presses up, and then you press triangle. Now, you don't actually have to interact with it, which I thought was a really interesting design choice. And the reason I liked that one was the fact that that's how a dialogue works, by you asking questions. If you think about it, and I'm sure we have all had this conversation with someone where it feels like you're just asking the questions all the time, and it's not a two-way conversation, which becomes very frustrating and also makes you feel like, why are we talking? Why are we participating in this dialogue exchange? And I think what the thing was that I liked about this was, again, you're forced to do it. You don't have to know more. You can just walk past and that prompt fades. Or if you role-playing as Ellie or want to know more about her character, you can press triangle. And again, it feels more of a two-way conversation. So I like that design choice. Instead of it playing automatically, you have to pry to get the knowledge and the information too. Now, not only that, but you will have, like we talked about earlier, in the main missions, these kind of narrative beats where the characters need to talk to one another. But there's a really nice moment where in the same music store, you go and you find a guitar and Ellie can play a song. I can't remember what song it was. Was it Duran Duran? I'll have to remember. But it was a really nice moment because Ellie's playing it. You learn that this is how Ellie plays it. The mechanic behind it is a nice mechanic. I do not play guitar, so I'm obviously unsure in terms of how easy. I've seen other people on YouTube being able to play actual songs by just cycling through the chords. But like I said, not only is it a nice moment, we get to know more about Ellie. She's grown up, she's learned how to play guitar, But we've also seen that Dina really likes that side of her. She likes the kind of creative, she loves the music. And again, it builds up a nice relationship moment. And that was off the beaten path. So these are kind of the elements that build up on the relationship. We talk about how those two talk on the horse, how conversations pause naturally and reignite, prompts, certain different side objectives as well as main objectives will bring up conversations and dialogues between them. So there's a lot there that really helps to build on the narrative. So when you are building, even just an open world or a hub world, all of these elements can help build a relationship, not only tell the story of the world, but tell the story between the characters as well. So yes, a really nice one, and I really did enjoy that. Next, we're going to move on to kind of density and the type of missions. So in this area, you do have two main objectives that you need to go through, and I believe that was the courthouse and I believe it was a church or a synagogue. I can't remember. It was a religious building, I believe, though, so I do apologize. So these are kind of the two main locations that the player has to go off and investigate, if we will. But not only that, you will have kind of other kind of areas the player can explore. Now, in terms of density, sometimes the choice here will not just come from that of the design, but also in terms of optimization for the game as well. In terms of how we did this in Division, we had to have 75 meters between that of your kind of side missions away from each other, as well as main missions had to have this kind of 75 meter radius away from them for optimization reasons. Now, obviously, if it was interior versus exterior, you could get away with kind of shorter distances, but it was these kind of rules that worked best for optimization. Not only that, but it can come from the design of the main and the critical path. Now, it's down to sometimes, now, let's say this is a hub world, but if you're making an open world game, it'll be like the open world designer or director who kind of is picking the time between that of experiences. If you think of that of Witcher 3, think about how, because you're riding on a horse, so you travel much faster, which is something you have to consider as well, because you cover more distance on a horse, a car, or a vehicle compared to on foot. But what you find there is they will kind of make a experiment where they first will put where they think is a right distance, and then time when the player can actually interact with something in the world, whether that just even means finding loot, getting into combat, kind of a traversal puzzle. All of these elements they'll think about, and they time it and then measure out, okay, well, was this too short? Was there enough space in terms of pacing? And sometimes it'll come up to something like, just as an example, a rule might be, oh yes, we need to make sure that they hit some kind of challenge every 3 minutes, every 5 minutes, every 2 minutes. They'll make that choice, and then that's how you kind of build around it. Now, I mention that because, as I mentioned, this is a hub world, so it's slightly different. They kind of control what the player is going to see at all times, where, as I mentioned with Division, the player had different kind of elements where there might be kind of these side missions, but what we also had was these looping giant patrols. And sometimes the patrols might be a different faction to the side missions, so then these two enemies would attack each other. Other times they might act almost as in reinforcements. They see that enemies of the same faction are down, and then they see the player, and it feels more like it's part of the mission. And it keeps it kind of lively because the systems interact so well. While with the hub world of Last of Us 2, they're very much in control about which enemies are where that they stay put, how far can they travel away, and kind of where is the chance of overlap. They're really in control versus a bit more open world, and even with the GTA franchise, it's very based solely on its systems, and GTA for sure has some of the best system design in the games industry, and how it all makes the things feel alive. Now, in Last of Us 2, they have different kind of missions. We talked about it there in terms of how we did it in Division, as well as that in GTA 5. But that's one of the things that really helps to build in terms of challenge, but also build on the world. In certain parts, you'll see kind of building more on the environmental storytelling, where you'll find loot and notes, but there will be no enemies. You see kind of where this highway has crashed and been destroyed, but you see armored trucks around them close to it, and seeing how what has happened there, and that there is a truck locked. Ellie and Dina break into it, you get more parts, but there isn't anything in terms of challenge for combat, but you see it, you hear one of the characters comment on it, and these kind of elements again, brilliant for building narrative. They know that there's going to be a lot of combat in the main missions as well as some of the other side activities. So by having your different kind of mission types, you find that you can have a nice kind of pacing control and also make things feel more memorable because of the fact that not everything is based on combat or not everything is based on a certain puzzle challenge, right? Not only that, but what they do really well with their types of missions is some will actually overlap. So you might find a key, like in this example, you find a key in a bathroom, and that leads to I believe it was a pet store, but it had been taken over by what I think was either by Fedra or it was by the Washington Wolf faction that you're in hunt for, and you get to kind of get a bit more detail on who they are as well as how they work as a group too. So very, very good stuff there. And that's great as well because you want kind of information to overlap with the main story. You want that as a designer because the more that you have on that, the more the world feels fleshed out and more detailed from it. Now, one of the things that I noticed with their density is they keep a lot of it kind of close together, very much on the main path. So there's there's many terms used for this. You can call it the golden path, the critical path, or the main path. I think we'll just call it the critical path. I tend to use golden path, but I know some people use golden path to describe the way to like extra loot. So for this purpose of this podcast, critical path is the main route that the player will follow in order to complete and move forward with the narrative. Golden path is more optional to find loot, and we'll call side paths that will lead to your side missions, for example. Now, most of their side missions are put on the critical path, and I think the reason for that is because of the fact that they know that the two locations I mentioned earlier, players have to visit them in order to go progress into the story. So with the fact that a lot of work has gone into this hub space, not only by art, design, but a lot of resources have been put into it, they want the player to explore. So they've kind of put it kind of closer together compared to what I mentioned with Division, because I think in terms of optimization, as I said, they don't need to worry about random enemies walking out and catching the player off guard. They're very much in control in how the level actually works itself. Now from that then, kids, they play around, should we say, in terms of height as well. The music shop you can actually enter from two ways, down at the ground level or up as well on the, you can climb through onto the second floor through that of I think it was a lockdown gate. You go across the bridge and can make your way through it that way. And this is another thing. We talked about using a horse or a vehicle, if you will, to travel through the space. But the reason they obviously give access to the player at different heights is they want the player to come off the horse. They want the player to get off and offer traversal challenges. So you feel the difference between when you're riding on a horse versus that of just on your feet yourself. So those kind of cool elements for it. They have different types of missions. They have nice moments where you're rewarded not only just in loot, but whether that be intel on the enemies you're looking for, or if it's a nice story beat with Dina and Ellie kind of building their relationship. So I thought it was really good over there overall with how they've paced it out. There are some more on the kind of the branching areas, but I do notice that they are more cluttered together. They're kept close for a reason, which is by no means is a critique. It's just fascinating to see the difference again, just showing you the difference between a hub world and an open world. Now, this is where we're going to wrap it on up. So I do hope that you've enjoyed this. You've understood now, well, what is a hub world? How do you build the world lore? How do you build up relationships? And kind of the thought behind density and the types of missions available. Because I said it's not all through combat. They have traversal, as well as just elements that improve the narrative too with kind of journal entries. So all of this helps to make a great space. And not just all of this, there's a lot of audio design, the beauty of the environment, and much, much more. But I do hope you've enjoyed this. I'm enjoying the game so far. Still a long way to go before I complete it, I imagine. But I will get there. So yes, I hope that you have enjoyed this episode. And yeah, if you want to reach out to me with your thoughts, and no spoilers please, you can do so at Max Pears on Twitter. If you want to email in with any questions or maybe your thoughts on why they design things a certain way, then you can do so leveldesignlobby@gmail.com. And if you want to support the show, then please head over to patreon.com/leveldesignlobby. Thank you all very much for your support. I really appreciate it. And I'll catch you all next time.